Welcome into Words with Wallace. I'm your host, Nick Wallace, coming at you. It's Friday, June 12th, little early morning podcast before I get started with the workday here, because we have to talk about probably the greatest comeback in NBA history. Of course, that is game 4 of the NBA Finals. The Knicks come back from down 29 points all the way back to beat the Spurs in the final seconds. And I really wish I could have enjoyed it, man, because I'm sure if you guys listen to this podcast, you guys understand that I did pick the Spurs before the playoffs. I've been saying it ever since my Celtics got bounced. I am rooting for the Spurs at this point. Maybe it's a little Texas thing, right? Maybe just the Wemby stuff is really fun. Maybe it's just because I want to be right. You know, it feels really nice to stick your chest out and say, hey, the Spurs team isn't too young. I think that they're ready to win now. But of course I did it to myself, right? I'm sitting there like squirming around, freaking out as the Knicks are making that comeback. Obviously, we watched the entire game, and it's just one of those where it was such a historic game, and I really don't have that much animosity for the players on the Knicks themselves. Like in hindsight, I wish I could have just sat there and maybe appreciated the game for how good it was, but instead I was like kind of screaming at the top of my lungs when Jalen Brunson hits a three over Wemby, when OG Anunoby has, of course, the play of the game, the tip to ultimately give the Knicks a win. So yeah, I didn't have a good time. I mean, I don't think the Taylor Swift stuff helped. You know what I mean? I mean, wasn't she courtside for a Cavs game a couple of weeks ago? Is Stevie Nicks, is she even from New York? I'm not too sure, but all the camera cuts of Celebrity Row at the Knicks games is wearing on me a little bit. Really hate to see those fans happy, but they should be. The Knicks are rolling right now, up 3-1 in the NBA Finals, and we have a lot to discuss. So what we're going to be talking about in this podcast is a very quick recap of course, games 1 through 3, since my last podcast was before the NBA Finals. So we will go through those first 3 games real quick. And then, of course, we want to spend some extended time on game 4, just wrapping our minds around what happened to even cause such a massive comeback, some key plays that stood out to me on both sides. And then, of course, at the very end of the podcast, we'll try to discuss like what happens next. I don't know if we want to call it a prediction because I've been incredibly wrong really every step of the way with this NBA Finals. And to be totally honest with you, I don't know what happens next, but I don't think the series is over. So we'll talk more about that at the end of this episode, and hopefully you guys enjoy. So let's start off with a quick recap of game 1. And just to catch you guys up to speed, the Knicks did win that game 105-95. I feel like the headline coming out of game 1 was that the Knicks made some dramatic comeback, coming back from down 14 points in the third quarter. But I really didn't like the way that that was branded. It's kind of funny. Like, obviously, in hindsight, the comeback game is going to be known as game 4, unless some even crazier shit happens later on in this series. But a 14-point lead in the modern NBA is nothing, especially when that 14-point lead was in like the early third quarter. They take out Wemby. The Knicks make an immediate run during the Cornets minutes like every team has done against the Spurs really all playoffs long. And the Knicks were actually in control of the game by the time the fourth quarter rolled around. And the game to close got very interesting because the Knicks rolled to 94 points, but they actually got stuck there for a good amount of time as the Spurs mounted their own mini comeback. They were down by 8 points at that point late in the fourth quarter. And Brunson, who was playing really well, actually went on like quite an extended cold spell as he missed several consecutive shots. The Spurs defense was awesome, really forcing up some tough looks. And the Spurs actually go on a 9-0 run and take a 1-point lead to go up 95-94 with about 2 minutes and 15 seconds left in the game. And from that point forward in game 1, the Spurs did not score a single point. So just to kind of walk you through what happened in those final plays, Brunson retakes the lead for the Knicks with a corner 3 off of his own offensive rebound. Fox got a fantastic wide open look, 8-foot jumper right in the middle of the paint that missed. Fox had a really bad foul the next possession as well, fouled Bridges on like a pretty desperate mid-range attempt that led to 2 points for the Knicks there. Then there was a really bad Wemby turnover. He dribbled it off his own foot, trying to make something happen. And then finally, the play that most people will remember from game 1 is like this insane jumper that Brunson had with less than a minute left in the game. He got the switch onto Devin Vassell, a guy that he's been hunting for the most part, him and Champagnie for the vast majority of this playoff series. Vassell plays great defense. He does kind of bite at the pump fake, and Brunson just kind of has to adjust. He doesn't get the foul call, and he's basically completely horizontal with the rim, throws up a shot and knocks it down, and that basically ices the game. From that point forward, the Spurs brick a couple more threes, and the Knicks make some free throws, and that's ultimately how game 1 came to an end. So As much as I felt like the Spurs were going to win this series, just to say it one more time, I did have Spurs in 6 before this finals, which is obviously off the table at this point. But I wasn't too shocked to see the Spurs lose game 1. You would have liked to have seen them take advantage of home court. Sometimes when the Knicks have, when teams have as much rest as the Knicks did heading into the finals, that gives the other team more of an advantage who played more recently. And I felt like that could have been an opportunity for the Spurs to capitalize on that. And it was not. But ultimately, game 1's a feel out game. I expected the first 2 games in San Antonio to be a split. You got a really bad shooting game from Wemby. And above all else, it was a really horrible De'Aaron Fox game in game 1. Like, again, I called out like the missed jumper. That's like a layup for him. Right into the bad foul for Bridges was a really big momentum swing in the favor of the New York Knicks. And I just felt like it was really awkward to watch Fox try to operate the offense when he doesn't have it going, because he's still the best option to get into that 2-man game with Wemby. The positives for the Spurs were at least both Castle and Harper were pretty great in game 1 and definitely looked ready for the moment. And the Knicks predictably got great games from their entire starting lineup, really besides Josh Hart, who was basically invisible in this game and was benched for Landry Shamet. But just like the Cleveland series, when they benched Josh Hart in that game 1, Shamet stepped up and made some big threes. Now let's move on to game 2. This was arguably the second best game of the series. I guess we have to put game 4 at number 1 on that ranking right about now. But game 2 was amazing. The Knicks won this one 105-104. And a lot of major plays in this game that I wanted to touch upon here. Just to give you guys the context of the game, the Spurs got up 10 points in the first quarter like they have literally every game in this NBA Finals. But in typical Spurs fashion, they completely throw away that lead by halftime, and the Knicks were pretty dominant from that point forward. Felt like Karl-Anthony Towns, the best half of basketball that he's had probably the entire postseason, was in that first half of game 2. He was dominant on both ends. He held Wemby to just 7 points on 4 shots, and none of the looks that Wemby was getting were anywhere close to the rim. So really impressive stuff from Karl-Anthony Towns, controlling the glass as well. And throughout most of the second half, I mean, the Knicks were in complete control. They went up double digits in that third quarter and held the lead to go up 97-85 with just 6 minutes left in the game. So again, the Knicks are up 12 at this point, and just like we saw in game 1, the Spurs are down big in the fourth quarter. Their backs are against the wall, and their defense steps up above anything else. To give you guys a little play-by-play, the Knicks have a shot clock violation followed by an immediate De'Aaron Fox step-back 3. Another near shot clock violation for the Knicks that ends with a Deuce McBride smothered mid-range jump shot that had no shot. Immediately, Fox goes on a little flurry here. He gets a nice layup on Brunson on the other end. Then there's a quick 3 from the Knicks. It's hard to criticize it because it was a wide-open 3 from Mikal Bridges that misses. Wemby comes back down, has a nice little dream shake layup on Karl-Anthony Towns for 2. There's a Knicks turnover, followed by a Brunson layup attempt that's blocked by Wemby, and then Vassell is like coming full speed down the top of the key, chucks up a 3 and drills it, which makes it a 2-point game. I want to say that the Knicks called timeout at this point as San Antonio was making a massive run. They come out the timeout. Brunson gets a pretty heavily contested 3 that misses. The Spurs control the rebound. There's a quick turnover by Fox that leads to a wide open Jalen Brunson 3. Now, again, he was taking some pretty tough contested looks prior to this, but nobody within 10 yards of him taking this 3-point shot. You felt like it was going down, and it bricked. And at this point, the Spurs have all the momentum. Harper comes back down, gets a really tough layup on Jalen Brunson, gets the switch that he wants, bounces off of him, gets the easy lay, and the game is tied. And you can see the camera cuts to Dylan Harper in this moment, who, again, I love. I've not been shy about that. But he's kind of got like the tongue out thing, very reminiscent if you guys remember game 7 of the OKC series. Jalen Williams on the Thunder did that when he gave the Thunder their first lead of the game. And I'm like, ooh, when these young guys are like really feeling themselves and they do like the really awkward tongue out thing, it hasn't ended well. And even though the Spurs were on a 14-0 run at that point, I did kind of have that dog-eared in the back of my mind, like, ooh, that's not really a good sign. And immediately the Knicks come back and take the lead, right? OG Anunoby gets fouled on a 3-point attempt after the call is actually challenged. He makes all 3 free throws. I should know that if there was any game that the Knicks fans deserve to be bitching a little bit about the refs, it's probably in game 2. I mean, that was a Tony Brothers game. It felt like the league wanted to even up the series. It didn't feel like the Knicks were getting a great whistle for really the entire second half when I was really locked in for it. And I will say that was a great challenge by Mike Brown to make sure that OG got 3 free throws, because that would have been a massive swing if that call was not challenged. Now, the Spurs do answer a little bit after OG hits the 3. Wemby gets a lob from De'Aaron Fox on a nice play. Immediately, the Knicks come back and score on a baseline out of bounds play. That's a layup for Brunson. Wemby, he does have a couple of really awful moments in this final stretch of the game. One of the ones that sticks out is a horrible step back three. He was like trying to post up Mikal Bridges. Bridges does a great job of deflecting the pass, and so Wemby kind of has to collect himself at the 3-point line. But we've seen Wemby take a few corner threes, and I feel like they really never go in. That's not a spot on the court that he's often shooting from. And he took like a step back three that was way off, ends up being an air ball. They get lucky because Brunson smokes a layup on the other end. Harper comes back down and gets 2 points off of a goaltending on a nice take to the basket. That play is immediately followed up by Bridges, who has a turnover, leads to a Wemby and one layup, which gives the Spurs actually their first lead of the half. They're up by 2 at that point. And at that point, there's about 40 seconds left in the game. This is where stuff gets really interesting. Brunson, despite his struggles for the large part of the fourth quarter, it's a really tough step back, one-legged jumper to tie up the game. There's 40 seconds left. The Spurs take a timeout. They have a 2-for-1 opportunity here. They have a side out and the plays get the ball to Wemby. He's being guarded by Mitchell Robinson, and Wemby settles for a really tough one dribble pull up that was pretty well contested by Mitchell Robinson. And now the thought process there is that the Spurs were clearly trying to go for a 2-for-1. The math says that they could guarantee themselves 2 looks, whereas the Knicks were only guaranteed 1. But I didn't like the shot. It felt out of rhythm. It felt rushed, and it gave the Knicks an opportunity to take the lead again and put the ball in the hands of Jalen Brunson. Now, they force a jumper from Jalen Brunson that's tough, that ends up being way off. And then this is the play that everybody's going to remember. The Spurs, they get the rebound. The ball goes to Wemby. There's about 14 seconds left in the game at that point. You can see Mitch Johnson telling them to go, like push the ball up the court. They have a timeout available that they don't use. And Wemby, in an effort of trying to advance the ball as quickly as possible, throws the ball up to Stephon Castle, who turns his head at the last second, bounces off Stephon Castle's back. Jalen Brunson gets the ball. Then there's a bit of a controversial foul because Wemby's just running full speed, trying to corral the loose ball, make up for his mistake, and he just kind of barrels into Brunson, who falls over. I mean, it was probably the right call. You could tell that Brunson also sold it quite a bit. But the worst part about this entire game, in my opinion, and I know I'm saying this from the perspective of somebody that was rooting for the Spurs, but like to give the Knicks some like really cheap free throws like that and put them in a spot where they go to the line with just seconds left in the game, where it's a tie game, and they just get some freebies where they don't even have to like make a field goal to actually take the lead, was really disheartening. Now, they do get kind of lucky because Brunson actually goes 1 of 2 in this situation, which is pretty shocking. Game 2 is probably the worst Brunson game that we've had of the series so far. And the Spurs have an opportunity to win the game. They put the ball in the hands of De'Aaron Fox immediately, like a screen and a slip from Wemby allows him to catch the ball in rhythm at the elbow. He's guarded by Mitchell Robinson, but honestly, it's like a really great look. I mean, I know you'd love to get something going to the basket there, but you did put the ball in the hands of your best player. He's always going to be open on those mid-range pull-ups. You feel a lot better about the mid-range than you do for 3, and he's just a little long on the jumper. Wemby misses the jump shot. Vassell gets the rebound, but there's really not much time left, and the game ends. So the Knicks go up by 1 on those Brunson free throws. They go up 2-0 in the series, and this one was pretty shocking. It just felt like the Spurs, to put all that effort in on their home court to make that 14-0 run late in the fourth quarter, it felt like that was their game to win, and instead they squandered it, mainly with that Wemby Castle turnover. So to spend a little bit more time on that, I do think if I was doing like a blame pie on that pass, I'd say it's about like 75% Wemby's fault. I know the coach is like screaming at him to go, but if you look at where everybody was positioned on the court in that play, Wemby's kind of in the corner. Castle is along the sidelines, so that's kind of a risky spot to pass the ball up anyways, just because there was Jalen Brunson standing right in front of Stephon Castle at that point, who would have been prime for like an easy charge call, or maybe he forces Castle to step out of bounds. I felt like the ball should have gone back toward the middle of the court to De'Aaron Fox in that moment, maybe even Dylan Harper as well. And if you're really that indecisive about it, you should have just called the timeout. So I do think that Castle was looking for a little bit, and then he turned his head. And so if you want to give like 25% of the blame to Stephon Castle, you can. But I do think that turnover more squarely falls on Victor Wembanyama. He also had that really bad step back 3 in the corner that airballed. And then, of course, he did have the opportunity to remove all those mistakes to make up for all of that with that final jumper. And he was just a little long. So that could have been a hero ball moment for Wemby that was missed. You did get a great game from Fox, which was extra disheartening for the Spurs fans. This was his best game of the series. He had over 20 points, unlike game 1. And huge credit to the Knicks for staying in the fight, for trusting Jalen Brunson, who did hit a couple of clutch shots in the fourth quarter, even though he really didn't have it going on. And they really just stayed in that game despite that massive momentum swing from the Spurs. The crowd is involved. They're not getting any calls, and the Knicks stayed in the fight and were able to pull that one out. So let's move on to game 3. This was, of course, the only Spurs win of the series. It was 115 to 111. There was a clear focus after game 2 to get Wemby more shots in the paint, especially early on in the game, and it proved to be effective. Immediately, he's getting dunks, he's catching lobs, he's doing a lot of damage in the paint. He had a pretty big stat line early. Felt like the Spurs were in control really the entire game, but the Knicks just would not die. Every time it felt like the Spurs had an opportunity to put them away, the Knicks just kept hanging around in the game. And a few late game moments that we want to touch on here. There's actually a Wemby missed layup off of a really nice Harper offensive rebound and dish that I thought was pretty notable. And the Spurs follow up that possession with De'Aaron Fox attacking OG Anunoby off the dribble, and he just kind of like falls down, and that ends up being another turnover for the Spurs as well. Brunson cuts the game to 4 off of an elbow jumper after he and Karl Anthony Towns both got blocked multiple times earlier in that same possession. Again, just showing how much fight the Knicks have on all these individual possessions. I felt like the play of the game for the Spurs was Stephon Castle hitting a super deep 3 off of just a grenade from Wemby late in the shot clock. He's like dribbling around at the top of the key. They're trying to get into their offense, and Wemby just chucks it to the deep wing to Stephon Castle, and he drills a smothered 3 to put them up 7. Now, the Knicks still had like one last gasp after that. OG has a free throw. Brunson has a deep ball 3 that cuts the game down to 3. The Spurs now have an opportunity to ice the game with the ball in their hands late in the fourth quarter, up by 3 points. They're trying to get the ball to Wemby, and Karl Anthony Towns is just holding Victor Wembanyama, not even letting him go up to the top of the key to set the high ball screen for De'Aaron Fox. Fox can't wait any longer. He just says, screw it. He's being guarded by OG Anunoby. He makes a move to the lane, gets to a little step back jumper and drills it, and ultimately that's what ices it. Of course, the Knicks, in typical Knicks fashion, like still make the score look even closer because OG Anunoby has like a ridiculous smothered corner 3, but luckily Stephon Castle, as he has all series, came up clutch at the free throw line, and the Spurs are able to ice the game. And even though the Spurs were, again, coming into this game down 0-2, headed back to New York, I felt pretty good that they were still alive in this series. I mean, we had President Trump, our fearless leader, in the building, which could only mean bad things for the Knicks. And beyond all that, I just felt like if the Spurs went out and really kicked their ass, because I still feel like the Spurs are the more talented team that could have just flipped the whole series on its head, and they could have had real momentum heading into game 4. But I felt like the Knicks, like, you couldn't really hang your head too much. Just the way that they stayed in that game, despite getting absolutely invisible performances from Bridges, McBride, and Shamet in this game. Like, Brunson didn't have his best shooting night yet again. Like, it just felt like a game that the Knicks should have just rolled over and died, and they had plenty of opportunities to, and they stayed in the game. And, you know, it took Stephon Castle hitting a really deep 3 and some really clutch free throws just to ultimately seal the game for the San Antonio Spurs. So I was still pretty impressed with the Knicks in this game, but on the Spurs side of things, you did have Wemby with his best game of the finals. He had 32 points. He was really dominant early in that game. It felt like they went away from some of the easy looks that he was getting in the first half, and it still felt like Wemby had a couple more levels that he could go up in this game. Harper was pretty great in the game as well, but him going 0 for 7 on literally wide open threes almost ended up killing the Spurs in that one. And I did just want to call out, there was some weird coaching from Mike Brown early in this game. I mean, we know Bridges had 2 early fouls in that game, but moving away from him so early for like a good 10 minutes of real game time just because Mikal Bridges picked up 2 fouls, I thought was weird. Like, he's not a guy that usually finds himself in foul trouble, and we know that he can be kind of finicky the way he floats in and out of these games offensively, and it just kind of felt like Bridges had lost confidence after that. And despite all that, the Knicks stayed in the game. So that sets up the scene for the insane Game 4 that we had on Wednesday night. Of course, you guys have seen the highlights by now. The Knicks won this game 107 to 106, and let's dive into this one a little bit more. We got to start with the first half, in which, just like every other game in this series, the Spurs immediately take it to the Knicks, and the Garden crowd does seem a little rattled. The Spurs shoot 14 for 26 from 3 in the first half, which is good for 54%. It was also a finals record. I'm not sure if it was a finals record for just made number of threes or shooting percentage or what, but these guys literally could not miss. The headliners were Vassell going 4 for 4 from 3, Fox going 3 for 5 from 3, and then Dylan Harper went 3 for 3 from the 3-point line. And there was just a ridiculous stuff from Dylan Harper in this first half as well. Maybe his best game of the entire series, even after the collapse. I mean, he had an insane like 360 lay in transition when he was really feeling himself, and the Spurs were up 25 at that point. The Spurs scored 76 first half points and entered halftime leading by 27. The only silver lining for the Knicks at that point in the game is that Brunson actually got into a pretty decent rhythm in the second quarter. I mean, OG Anunoby was phenomenal all game long, but the real death sentence would felt like that for the Knicks was Cat getting into foul trouble and the bench just giving the Knicks absolutely nothing in the first half. I mean, they closed the first half with literally just 2 bench points, and they were both from Jordan Clarkson, which is kind of ridiculous. Mitchell Robinson was minus 14 at that point, and he was just getting absolutely cooked by Wemby. I'm sure you guys have seen the clip now, but he ends up picking up like a flagrant foul on Mitchell Robinson and ends up like doing the I'm in your head thing. He's like talking shit to Mitchell Robinson, which for the record, I didn't have a problem with that in the moment. You're the best player in the series, at least on paper. You're trying to get yourself going. You're on the road. I felt like that was a reasonable time to talk shit. Obviously, it didn't end well for Victor Wembanyama in that game, but again, things were just not looking good for the Knicks at halftime. And just some really weird moves from Mike Brown again, like the fact that they went to Jeremy Sohan and Hawk Porty like early on in this game was kind of odd. Like I know Cat had the foul troubles early, but I think he only finished the game with 4 fouls too. Like he didn't even end up picking the 5th one. I mean, honestly, if I was in that situation and I'm Mike Brown, like I would rather play Cat with 4 fouls in the first half than hitting the Jeremy Sohan button. And those minutes were predictably not pretty. And that brings us to the second half of game 4. And I did want to call out, I rewatched the entire second half yesterday because the ending of the game was just playing on a loop in my mind, and I really just could not wrap my mind around how the Knicks were able to make such a massive comeback. It does start in the third quarter, and if I had to pick one moment that started to tilt the tides in the favor of the Knicks, it would probably be after the flagrant foul that was called on Victor Wembanyama. He caught Cat in the face with like an unintentional elbow. I do think the flagrant one was the right call because it was an elbow to the face. He got Cat pretty good. A lot of animosity toward Wemby regardless in this series, but it didn't help by the fact that he grabbed Brunson by the back of the neck and like chucked him to the ground in whatever that was, game 2, I want to say. So the Knicks fans were really letting Wemby have it in that moment. And they followed that up with a nice little 7-0 run, right? OG Anunoby has a dunk. Brunson hits a 3. Keldon Johnson has an awful play where he's just spamming missed layups and offensive rebounds, refusing to kick the ball out as Keldon Johnson does. And I will say, Mitch Johnson takes a timeout when the lead is cut down to 22. Nice little heady play there to not let the Knicks get any sort of momentum. Still very much in control, up 22. Ultimately, that 7-0 run is stretched to a 13-0 run after a Josh Hart top of the key 3. There's a Harper turnover. It is worth noting that they take out Wemby for like a possession or 2 in the third quarter and immediately bring him back in the game after some Stephon Castle free throws, which were arguably the best source of offense for the Spurs in the entire second half. So I will say, again, Mitch Johnson, he called some early timeouts. He did not get cute with the substitution patterns, with the lineup decisions. He really only rested Wemby a little bit because I think he understood the momentum that the Knicks were having. And ultimately, they end the third quarter cutting the lead all the way down to 15. There's an awful turnover from De'Aaron Fox with a minute left in the third quarter where he throws the ball between Wemby and Castle as he's bringing the ball up the court, and he's really under minimal pressure from Jordan Clarkson, and I don't know why he just chucked it out of bounds. And so immediately, like the Knicks always do, anytime there's a bad play by the Spurs, they follow it up with a bucket on the other end, and there was an OG Anunoby step back 3 right after that. Fox had another turnover late in the third quarter. Now, Jordan Clarkson had his own turnover, and Wemby had a rough miss at the end of the third quarter buzzer, and ultimately that netted out to the Knicks being down 15 heading into the fourth quarter. They actually extend the lead to 20 points off of Wemby putting back his own miss with 9 minutes and 30 seconds left. Alvarado follows that up with a corner 3, and I was pretty shocked to see Jose Alvarado in the game at this point for the Knicks, but he was giving them pretty consistent offense. It felt like the Knicks on the defensive end of the court were doing a great job disrupting what the Spurs wanted to do. And especially in the fourth quarter, it felt like they figured out that the best way for them to just stop the lobs to Wemby is just shoving him the second that he rolls to the basket, because if he catches it, it's basically guaranteed to be a dunk or free throws at the very least. But if you shove him before he catches the ball, it's just going to be a foul on the floor, which is going to result in a side out. So as long as you're not in the bonus, you're preventing points by just shoving Wemby. And there were even a couple of them where Towns was kind of disrupting Wemby quite a bit, where he would still catch the ball, but he was then catching the ball like way outside of what he wanted to. That led to a miss. And it was just kind of a cheap way for the Knicks to gain an advantage on the Spurs in that situation. There was a ridiculous Karl-Anthony Towns step back 3 with 7.5 minutes left in the game that cut the lead to 12. I thought that was a very loud play. There was also, shortly after that, a really bad Dylan Harper turnover where, again, because of the Knicks' defensive pressure, Wemby is giving a handoff to Dylan Harper really close to half court, and Harper just catches it and immediately has to tiptoe the half court line to prevent a backcourt violation. He bounces the line, then loses his balance, jumps, turns, throws a nuke, an absolute pop-up ball that the Knicks immediately take the other way and turns into a really tough drive on Wemby to cut the lead to single digits. Once it's down to 9, the Garden crowd is really buzzing at this point. They feel like it's within striking distance. There are some Castle free throws that give the Spurs more life, bringing it back to 11, but you follow that up with Brunson having his own set of three free throws, Vassell missing a wide open 3, Brunson making a tough layup. The lead is now down to 7 points. And I will say at this point, the Spurs offense is really predicated around De'Aaron Fox dribbling the air out the ball and a lot of attacks on OG Anunoby that didn't make a ton of sense. Jose Alvarado's on the court. Jalen Brunson's on the court. You have Dylan Harper, who's playing really well, and he's just parked up in the corner or in the dunker spot. And the offense at this point was, again, very Fox heavy. They actually got a look with just under 5 minutes left that I really liked, where he did make a nice move on OG Anunoby. He got to a nice little snatchback behind the back move that got him wide open for a left elbow jumper. I thought it was going down and it just missed. Of course, that leads to some really great ball movement for the Knicks on the other end. They get Wemby looking tired, making him rotate a bunch of times. It results in a wide open OG Anunoby 3 to cut it down to a 4-point game. Now, the Spurs do bounce back a little bit. They have a Fox 3 immediately followed up by Jose Alvarado doing like a Harlem Globetrotter-ass move where he like spins Champagny around and gets to a layup to cut the lead back down to 5. And there is a nice Wemby jumper off of a nice pass from Fox right after that. But it's still kind of odd that the offense is built around Fox dribbling the ball, attacking OG Anunoby. And Jose Alvarado, to his credit, he has 2 threes in this fourth quarter. He has a layup, and he has another 3 with 3 minutes left in the game to cut the lead down to 4. They follow that up with the Spurs miss. And this is where stuff gets really interesting, man. I mean, the Garden is absolutely buzzing. In real time, I'm like freaking out trying to process how we even got to this point. And the ball finds Jalen Brunson with 2 minutes and 18 seconds left in the game. He gets the switch on Wemby at the perimeter, gives him a little shimmy, and ends up pulling up for 3 and just buries the 3 over Wemby. I literally didn't know what was happening. I audibly remember screaming at that play. Right after this play, this would have been easily the worst play of the night for the New York Knicks if they had not come out on top. They force Fox into another awful turnover where he leaves his feet on a pass, throws the ball over his head, like across the court. Josh Hart picks it off perfectly, is sprinting toward the hoop, has a wide open layup, and just smokes it. He gets stuck in between deciding if he wants to dunk, if he wants to lay it in, ends up trying to guide the ball toward the rim. The momentum carries the ball, hits the back rim, and misses. I will say, like, I did not enjoy the crowd shots of the Knicks fans because they were really obnoxious for the most part. But I will say, you could literally see Larry David's courtside seat, and he has his arms out, and he looks like he's about to collapse after the layup. And so I will say, even in that moment where I was freaking out, really hoping the Spurs weren't going to let this collapse happen, I was like dying on my couch when I realized, I'm like, oh, fuck, that's Larry David. And luckily for Josh Hart, his mistake is immediately erased because the Spurs corral the rebound. They get a nice move where Wemby's going to the basket. He misses what could have been an and one layup that I thought would have been a pretty easy opportunity to get 3 points right there. Instead, he misses it. He goes to the line for 2 shots, and he misses them both. I was shocked to see that. Wemby's been an unbelievable free throw shooter the entire postseason. It did feel like he adjusted after the first miss. He was long on the first shot. He took his breath like he always does. I thought that second shot was going in. He left it just short, bounced like 3 times in the front of the rim and rolls off. And of course, in typical Brunson fashion, immediately makes the Spurs pay by getting a tough floater to give the Knicks the first lead of the game. It's just complete bedlam in the building at that point. That is followed up by kind of a controversial play where Castle fumbles a catch. He has Josh Hart draped all over him. They're smashing into each other as he spins baseline and he's going down that route, and they're just banging into each other. And ultimately they call out of bounds on Castle, even though it looked like he never really stepped out. And I felt like if there was a lot of contact both ways, Castle did reach his elbow kind of high, and Hart definitely flopped trying to make up for the layup that he had just smoked. And I felt like if anything, it could have been a foul on Hart. I felt like no call probably would have made the most sense. And ultimately, I wasn't too upset about it because I felt like that possession, just like many others for the Spurs, was going nowhere with Castle like hurtling toward the hoop on the baseline with no real angle with just seconds left on the shot clock. So I'll allow it, but it is worth noting, like in this stretch in the fourth quarter, again, it wasn't some big run for the Knicks. They were phenomenal on offense, but they weren't like automatic. The Spurs defense came up with a bunch of clutch stops down the stretch, including one right after that out of bounds call where they do force a shot clock violation after playing great defense on Brunson. The Spurs end up settling for a Fox jumper on the other end, which is short like it always is because he's attacking OG Anunoby off the dribble. But luckily for the Spurs, Stephon Castle makes a great play. Josh Hart completely fell asleep on the box out, and Castle gets the rebound right in front of the rim. Hart comes in super late and just clobbers him. And in typical Castle fashion, he's super clutch at the line and makes both free throws to give the Spurs a 1-point lead again. And arguably the most disastrous play of the entire game for the San Antonio Spurs immediately follows the clutch free throws. They actually get another great stop on the Knicks in clutch time. They force Brunson into a really tough floater over Wemby. Castle deflects the ball toward their own hoop. There's a foot race for the ball. Fox has a bit of an advantage position-wise going for it, but still, at this point in Fox's career with how hobbled he is, I was almost surprised he even won the foot race to get to the ball. There's just about 15 seconds left in the game at this point. The Spurs are up by 1. The shot clock is off. All Fox has to do is just do like a little Nash dribble and force them to foul him. That way he can go to the line with the chance to extend the lead up to 3 points. Instead, I guess he thinks that he has more space than what he does. He tries to go up with a lefty layup that is easily devoured by OG Anunoby. Just a phenomenal play by him. Complete brain fart from De'Aaron Fox. And the Knicks are able to control the rebound. There is kind of like an under-discussed moment there where Jose Alvarado is hurtling past half court with just seconds left in the game. And it looks like there's an opportunity for Fox and Castle to actually trap him and maybe force a backcourt violation. It's not a backcourt. It is awfully close. And then Fox ends up using the last foul to give so they can get their defense set. And the Knicks have the opportunity to inbound the ball after a timeout with 5.7 seconds left in the game. I think you guys know what happens from this point forward, but they end up getting the ball to Brunson. They're down by 1 at this point. Again, just 5.7 seconds left. OG Anunoby's the inbounder. Brunson gets it, immediately chucks up a very difficult deep 3 over Victor Wembanyama, but nobody was covering OG Anunoby. Nobody boxed him out. He has a free reign to the basket, and so when the shot is short, OG is the first hand there. He's floating over everybody, has to guide the ball over Dylan Harper. Tough angle, full speed, just gets that right hand on the ball and tips the ball in to give the Knicks another 1-point lead with just 1.2 seconds left of the game. Just insane back-to-back plays from OG Anunoby, the block on Fox, the putback to give the Knicks the lead, and there's 1.2 seconds left in the game. I will say we did see on Twitter the next day as Harper is going to inbound the ball for a chance to win the game. Karl-Anthony Towns is guarding the inbound, and he also has like the fans that are courtside crowd Harper even more in that moment, which I kind of respect a cat for trying to gain a competitive advantage from the crowd in that moment. But if you're the ref, you're not going to tell the douchebags that are courtside to not just be like in Dylan Harper's way. Like they were almost like creeping into his line of sight, which was just ridiculous that the ref wouldn't say anything there. But whatever. They inbound the ball. They actually drop a great play that gets Castle hurtling toward the basket, wide open for a lob. And ultimately, Karl-Anthony Towns gets a hand on the ball. It probably should have just been blown dead at that point because, again, the time would have expired. Castle does get it, but he has no opportunity to get a shot off. And the Knicks win the game. Now, I want to take some more time to just kind of make sense of everything that transpired and quickly reiterate the plays that I thought stood out the most. It was the Brunson 3 over Victor Wembanyama to cut the lead to 1. Again, the 2 best players in the finals. Brunson in front of his home court just delivering that shot. Wemby being a little too tired to close out on Brunson a little bit further. Like he shouldn't have been as worried about getting beat off the dribble in that situation. I know that's a tough matchup for him, but credit to Brunson for making such a massive play. Number 2, of course, is obviously the smoked Josh Hart layup off of the awful Fox turnover. I thought that was massive and was immediately negated by Wemby going to the line and smoking both free throws. And then finally, the biggest play of the game was, of course, the OG Anunoby tip back, a play that's going to go down in NBA Finals history. Just ridiculous stuff all around. So as we sit here and we try to make sense of Game 4 and put a bow on how the Spurs were able to allow such a ridiculous comeback, it's because they only scored 30 points in the second half. They shot 8 of 39 from the field in the second half. They were 3 of 17 from 3. Wemby was pretty awful in the second half as well. If you look at the stats, it almost looks worse than what it actually was. He was 8 points on 3 of 14 shooting. Again, it didn't feel that bad because the way he ended up at 3 for 14 is like he had multiple possessions where he was also doing the spamming miss layups, like putbacks thing, where there were 3 different plays where he had multiple misses where he ended up getting a shot still, right? He had like 2 different plays where he would miss once, miss twice, and put it back. And then there was another play where he missed those like 2 threes in the same possession. So that almost felt worse than what it actually was when you look at the stat line. But I thought it was more alarming that there weren't better shots from Wemby. There weren't more shots from Wemby in like the final 5 minutes of the game. And really, there was nothing going on at the rim besides those like missed layups and like spammed putback attempts. It was valid to point out his lack of like a go-to move and his lack of ability to individually create his own offense down the stretch in that game. Maybe it was a fatigue thing, but it's very valid criticism of the guy who I thought was the best player in the series and the best player in the world heading into this finals matchup. And honestly, if Victor Wembanyama was like 10% better in all of these games, like there's a world where the Spurs sweep. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but like that's how close every single one of these games has been. Like the margins are that thin. And if Wemby was as good as what I think he can be, then this series might already be over, or at least the Spurs would be up 3-1 instead of being down 3-1. Fox, I think, was the worst player on the court in these closing moments of the game. He was 2 of 8 shooting, scored 8 points in the second half, but it was really like the 4 turnovers and obviously the awful layup decision with 15 seconds left in the game that was completely indefensible. Like, I know he's banged up, but he's out there mainly for his decision making and being like that calming veteran presence. And I don't know what goes through your mind. Like, maybe he just thought he was more open than what he was when he went up for that layup on OG Anunoby, but that is like a back-breaking mistake that in all likelihood would swing the game and maybe even the series in the favor of the San Antonio Spurs. I felt like Castle actually played pretty well in the second half. All 8 of his points came at the free throw line. He was 8 for 8 from the line, but at least he felt more composed than the other Spurs that were out there. And I would have liked to see him handling the ball a little bit more, especially when OG Anunoby isn't guarding him and Mikal Bridges was largely benched for most of that second half. So like he would have had a matchup where you would have felt better about attacking. I know he had Josh Hart on him a lot of that time, but whatever, man. At least you kind of know what Castle's going to give you. Harper was fine in the second half, but he was 0 for 3 from 3 on all wide open attempts. That would have obviously been nice for the Spurs in that situation. And I just didn't like the way that Harper was used. Like he was in the dunker spot, he was posted up in the corner. They had Brunson and Alvarado on the court in the same time. And the fact that they didn't use Harper, who really had it going in that first half as much in the second half, was really damning for the Spurs. And to shift the focus to the Knicks here for a second, the fact that they pulled off this comeback where only really 3 of their guys had above average games. Like obviously OG Anunoby, this is all-time shit from him. He was 33 points on 10 of 15 shooting and had, again, the insane block on Fox, the insane putback to win the game. Brunson was phenomenal in this game. Obviously, he had 36 points, 7 assists, and 3 steals. He was money. And really, the only other guy that played above average to their regular season standards is Jose Alvarado. I mean, he had 8 points in the game, all those coming in the fourth quarter, and he was a plus 11 in 15 minutes. So, I mean, a solid game from Cat, too. I don't want to sit here and act like he did nothing. Like, again, the big step back that he had early in that fourth quarter, the nice drive he had on Wemby, and of course, getting his hand on the inbounds play was nice. I saw some people on Twitter calling Cat like a playoff hero for doing jumping jacks in front of Dylan Harper and tipping the pass. Like, whatever. If you want to put that much stock into that play because it was the final moments of the game, yes, it could have swung it. That's a lucky play. I'm sorry. I'm not going to reward a guy for being 7 feet and doing jumping jacks for 5 seconds. Like that's what it came down to. But whatever. Cat was solid. He just wasn't great. I mean, he only had like 10 points or something in the game. But everybody else was like really underwhelming. I mean, as a team, they shot 11 from 20 from 3 in the second half. So the Knicks were 55% shooting from 3 after the Spurs were 54% shooting from 3 in the first half. And I know that the volume of 3-point shots adds a lot of variance in the modern NBA, but I have never seen the pendulum of 3-point shooting swing that much in a single game. Like the Spurs had it in half 1, the Knicks had it in half 2, and that's the largest reason as to why they were able to pull off this comeback. Now, a lot of the collapse of the Spurs does fall at the feet of Mitch Johnson. After watching it back, I mean, it wasn't great, but I almost felt a little bit better about him just because he didn't get cute with the lineup decisions, right? He still played Wemby 44 minutes in this game, even though they were up big for such a large portion of the game. So they weren't getting cute there. I felt like most of the timeouts that he called were pretty smart. He was ahead of the game for the most part. I mean, I probably still would have used a timeout on the play where Harper was like tiptoeing the half court line to prevent a turnover. And then probably the same thing on that play where it just felt like Castle was going nowhere on Josh Hart, and ultimately they called out of bounds. Like, that would have cut them down to one timeout at that point. So maybe you're worried about that, but maybe you would have used the timeout there to save your team some possessions. But ultimately, the most damning thing that Mitch Johnson did or didn't do was the way that they used Wemby and Harper in the offense down the stretch. I mean, you need to get Wemby more paint touches. It was just ridiculous the amount of time that they had De'Aaron Fox attacking OG Anunoby off the dribble, especially in a game where Fox was not particularly good. Obviously, he was great in the first half like everybody was, but in the second half, he really did not have much going. And again, having Harper in the dunker spot in the corner, not getting him in the action, not attacking Jose Alvarado, not attacking Jalen Brunson, just really shocking stuff there. And on the other end, you have to give a ton of credit to Mike Brown for not letting his foot off the gas, for working his way through the entire bench rotation to find Jose Alvarado and having the trust in him to give him critical fourth quarter minutes. I think there's a lot of coaches, and especially Tom Thibodeau, who was obviously coaching this team last year, that never would have made his way that deep into the rotation during an NBA Finals game. Now, we probably still could have done without like the Jeremy Sohan and Ariel Hockporty minutes in the first half. I thought that was really weird. And again, I'll die on the hill where I'll play Cat with 4 fouls in the first half before those guys see the floor, but whatever. And he did just come up with a defensive game plan that made the Spurs extremely uncomfortable in the fourth quarter. And just to give more flowers to the heroes of the Knicks in this game, I mean, Brunson is just undeniable. I know it hasn't been the most efficient series for him as he's shooting about 40% from the field in the series, but the dude's giving you 30 points per game, and he's come up clutch in every matchup. And the Knicks offense always runs through this guy, and I'm totally fine with him continuing to shoot, continuing to have the green light, even in games where he doesn't have it going on, because he is the best closer in this series, and that is the main reason that the Spurs are up 3-1. And you can honestly make the argument that he's just been the best player in the series, point blank period. Has he outplayed Victor Wembanyama when you include the defensive stuff? You can go either way on that, but my gut says yes, because they're up in the series right now. OG Anunoby, I can't say enough good things about. I mean, he has truly just turned into like Kawhi Leonard light right about now. I mean, really the only thing that OG Anunoby is missing from Kawhi Leonard is like the handle and his ability to get to his spots in isolation. Now, he has scored a lot of ISO buckets, like his face-up jumper and some of his just like really powerful up fake drives to the basket have been strong. He doesn't have like the filthy step back stuff that Kawhi has quite yet, but good God. I mean, he's scoring 24 points per game on 58% shooting from the field and 56% shooting from three in the NBA Finals. He's the second best defender in the series. And honestly, if the Knicks end up closing out the Spurs, which in all likelihood, I think that they will, considering they just have to win one of the next 3 games, his putback to win game 4 is probably a top 3 finals play of my lifetime, at least that I've seen live. The fact that that completely swung the outcome of the game and maybe the series, because I still feel like if the Spurs end up winning game 4 and it's 2-2 and the road team has won every matchup, they're going to have real momentum heading into game 5. But that's not how it played out, because OG Anunoby had that tip. And besides what, like the Ray Allen 3 obviously comes to mind for finals events that I've watched live, as well as the LeBron block in game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals. But beyond that, as far as an individual play in the NBA Finals, I mean, that is on a very short list. So you're probably looking at like a top 5 play of my lifetime in the finals. You're definitely looking at like a top 10 play in NBA history, assuming that the Knicks are able to close out the Spurs in one of the next 3 games. Now, Cat has been great in this series too. It did feel like he was a bit of a kryptonite to Wemby, especially when you looked at his performance in game 2. He's come back down to earth a little bit after he had his own finals MVP buzz that I thought was a little ridiculous. But it's just insane, like the position the Knicks are in. Even while like Bridges and Josh Hart have now kind of disappeared in multiple games. I mean, Hart was pretty bad in game 4 and he was completely non-existent in game 1. And then Mikal Bridges has just been completely off the radar in both games 3 and 4. And I thought the Knicks were going to have to play perfect in order to win in this series. And they definitely haven't been perfect, but here they are in the driver's seat of this series. So finally, the last little segment that I have for you guys is trying to discuss what's going to happen next. I hesitate to call it a prediction because I don't feel confident in anything I'm saying, and I don't think you guys should be taking my word for much of anything either. But I will say that the series isn't over. A lot of the time, it does feel over. Like you would think a young team in San Antonio might just roll over after having such a disheartening comeback in game 4, but I don't really see it playing out like that. If I had to give you guys a path for the Spurs, this is what it would look like. Obviously, game 5 is tomorrow on Saturday. It's going to be back home in San Antonio. The Knicks might be coming down a little bit still from the aftermath of such an insane comeback. And I just feel like the Spurs playing in front of their home court, should have a little bit of juice. Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. I feel pretty confident that the Spurs win game 5 at home. Then that brings us back to game 6, where everybody in the world is going to be picking the Knicks. The ticket prices are going to be out of control because if you're a Knicks fan, you'd probably rather see the Knicks win in 6 rather than seeing them win in 5, just so you can maximize the insane celebration that's going to take place on the streets of New York City if the Knicks were able to close out the Spurs on their home court. And there is just going to be such immense amounts of pressure on the Knicks in that game. Almost more pressure on the Knicks in game 6 if it gets to that point than what the Spurs are going to be under, because every missed shot, it's going to be like, oh God, or if the Spurs, like they do in every game, start off to a big first quarter run, there's going to be a nervous energy in the building. Obviously, the fans are still going to have confidence in their team no matter what after the ridiculous comeback we saw in game 4. But I just feel like when the expectations are that high and this city has been starved of a title for 50 years, and obviously they do have an unbelievable fan base that's very passionate, that almost puts an unfair amount of pressure on the Knicks in that situation. And that could potentially open the door for the Spurs to win game 6. They absolutely should have won games 3 and 4 in New York City already if it wasn't for that colossal choke job in game 4. So we know that the Spurs have confidence on the road. They have a level of comfort playing in the Garden. So that's kind of the path for the Spurs to win game 6. And then that sets us up for a game 7 that, of course, is going to be back in San Antonio. And like every other game in this series, that's a complete coin flip. So that's just the path for what it would take for the Spurs to win this series. I know that's not anything revolutionary from my line of thinking, but I really don't think that this series is over. If I really had to guess at this point, like, yes, I would at this point pick the Knicks because they just don't die in any of these games. Every game feels like a coin flip, and they have the best closer in the series. So I'd be foolish to not expect the Knicks to win one of the next 3. Like, if I really had to guess, I guess I'll go with Knicks in 6. But for what it's worth, I do think that the Spurs are going to come out and win game 5 on Saturday, which does make the series slightly more interesting. And just to give you guys a 10,000-foot view, and maybe this is like a stupid thing to say, I am like almost nervous of what the stars of this series and game 4 alone are going to do to the San Antonio Spurs long term, because we have seen it time and time again. The reason why people weren't picking the Spurs heading into this postseason is A, like teams like the Thunder are very talented and deserve to be the favorite after the regular season. But B, it's just all about youth, right? It's inexperience. Historically, we've seen these young teams, even if they're immensely talented, they need to get punched in the mouth. They need to lose in a deep playoff setting before they can actually overcome and win the title. And this is going to be like downright traumatic for the Spurs if they end up losing this series, with the way that they've had a chance to win game 1, had a chance to win game 2, should have absolutely won game 4. That is inexcusable. The biggest comeback in NBA history. I think it might just put an even larger chip on the shoulders of the Spurs' 3 best young players, like to give Harper, Castle, and Wemby this much playoff experience this early on in their career. You know, Fox is probably a shoo-in to be gone from this roster, which opens up more minutes for Harper and his development next year. And I just think going back to Wemby, like the turnover, dribbling it off his foot in game 1, and the turnover to Castle in game 2, and the missed jump shot that could have won that game. And then, of course, in game 4, like the missed free throws and the lack of aggression and ability to get the Spurs out of the funk in game 4. Like, Wemby has had truly haunting mistakes in every game. Like, I obviously really enjoy watching Wemby. I think he's as good as advertised, but it is difficult to defend all the mistakes that this guy has made. But I just think he's a good enough player where, like, he is going to remember that, and this might just turn into like a Darth Vader-esque saga for the rest of the NBA, because the Spurs are going to be on this warpath, and the chip on Wemby's shoulder is going to be even bigger if the Knicks are able to pull out this series. So I can't wait. I know that that's a long, rambling podcast for you guys, but I'm so excited to continue watching this series. Again, wish I could have enjoyed game 4 a little bit more, but I am not being shy about supporting the Spurs in this series, so I've done it to myself. So I'll leave off on that, and I cannot wait for game 5 on Saturday. So that's going to do it for this podcast today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. My next podcast will come one of 2 ways. Let's say that the Knicks win the NBA Finals, and I will be doing a podcast kind of recapping the finals, what this means for the Knicks, what it means for the Spurs, all that stuff. Or if the Spurs are able to force a game 7, that would be next Friday, a week from today is when that game 7 would take place. I will probably get you guys a podcast previewing that game 7, because we are going to be set up for an awesome basketball game if the series ends up shaking out like that. So again, either expect a podcast recapping the Knicks win or expecting a game 7 preview on my next episode. But before I let you guys go, be sure to follow @Words with Wallace on everything. That includes Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to support the show on social media as well. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and I will talk to you guys next week. Peace.